Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. It's tempting at this time of year, especially if the weather's good, to think that growth will continue. You'll have more fruits, that the ones that aren't ripe will develop and mature before winter comes in. But I'm afraid experience shows that that is extremely unlikely. So with squashes and pumpkins, ignore any young fruits that are yet to ripen. We don't want any more growth because we don't want the plants to be any bigger. What we want to focus all our energies onto now is ripening what we already have. So that means exposing all the fruits to as much sunlight as possible. So just cutting away any leaves that are casting any shade at all. And while you're about it, any tendrils or growth that don't result in a ripe fruit can be cut off. If you've got a really nice pumpkin like this, Marina di Chioggia, to make sure it stores well, I want to get a nice thick rind. And the more sunshine that gets for the next few weeks, the thicker the skin will get, and that means the better it will store. Now, I'd like to turn this over, and it means that that side will be ripened. These should get another couple of weeks of sunshine. I normally harvest round about the beginning of October, but the longer they can stay out in the sun, the longer they will store. Now, coming up on today's programme, Adam explores the gardens at Lowther Castle in Cumbria, which have been brought back to life in great style.
The whole place is intoxicating. It takes you on this enchanted journey. And do you know what? I think I am in love.
We meet a grower whose passion for dahlias has even taken over her house.
I've got Small World, Goethe Twilight, all drying up here. I've got some more Cafe au lait here. And as you can see, I've just gone a bit bonkers.
Toby visits an inspirational gardener who over the course of a long lifetime has turned a farm into a garden.
Wow, this has a different atmosphere, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. You feel really quite small walking through here, don't you?
And I shall be planting garlic to harvest next summer. Come on, bring your apple. Good girl. For the vast majority of us, the story of this summer has been one of drought and coping with it. Now, I've got some grasses here that will be suitable for dry shade, but I've also got a plant that seeds itself around the garden, which is ideal. This is pheasant grass, Ornamental lessoniana. And you can see it seeded itself in the shade of a hedge where all the moisture is being sucked up. But you've got a lime tree there, we've got a hornbeam hedge, we've got a box cone. This is probably the driest point it possibly could have chosen. And yet it's relatively happy. So I know that it will thrive in dry shade. They're very tough plants. Not only will they grow in dry shade, they're very adaptable, they'll grow in full sun. Much easier than most grasses. So I'm going to take that, plonk it in there, and I'm going to take these up to the orchard beds and start the new planting. I've had a little time to take stock on the effects of the drought, and there's no question that these orchard beds have suffered most. At this time of year, in previous years, you wouldn't see any bare soil at all. There would be colour, and it would be covered with luxuriant growth. Well, that has gone. So we've got to change and adapt. Now, I do have to stress that most grasses are very happy in full sun. So I've chosen grasses particularly that will adapt to shade, but some of them will grow in full sun as well. Now, obviously, there is the pheasant grass that I've dug up, which we can start with. And actually, they're really quite big, vigorous grasses. Now, good drainage will definitely help. And the best way to get drainage, particularly if you've got clay like I have, is just add lots of organic material. That will help more than anything else. Now, I've got here what looks like a fairly insignificant little tuft of a grass. It's a carex diversa, and it has good green growth, and it's a really good ground cover grass. Doesn't get too big. So a little group of these will go in the front. And what I'm going to put back on the other side is this. Now, this is a Japanese grass called Hakanakloa. The flowers on it are very delicate, and you've got this wonderful, soft, feathery growth that creates lovely, elegant shapes. So I've got a group of 3 that I'm going to take over to the other side. So we'll put that there, and I will have another there. And I want these near the edge so they can spill. Finally, I've got another carex, and this is called Ice Dance, and it's got this creamy edge to the leaves. Now, this is a sedge, and sedges have solid stems, whereas grass are hollow, and again they add that green, that life to a border. And these I can put in here. Sedges normally grow best in damp places, but this is an exception. This will grow well in dry conditions. Right, I will plant the pheasant grass. Traditionally, you move grasses in late spring or even early summer, but I think if the soil is warm, you can certainly move pheasant grass. Now, pop that in. Hasn't got very deep roots. Just firm that around like that. Now, when I've planted all these grasses, I will give them a really good soak. And while I'm planting these, Toby is taking us to a garden in Axminster in Devon. And by any standards, you can say that this is a garden that is long established.
A week's a long time in gardening. During those 7 days, flowers can open and go over and go to seed. And what about a year? Bare branches of trees can leaf up and fall to the ground, and whole gardens can come to life and then go back into the soil. In a decade, a new border can become long in the tooth. But what about this? Imagine gardening in the same garden for 60 years. Well, I've come here to meet a very special woman who's done just that. Mary Benger and her husband John moved here in 1959 to start a small dairy farm. And while John was busy working the fields, Mary gardened around the house. And as her passion and obsession grew, the boundaries of the garden spread across the farm. The farm is long gone, and today, where cows once grazed, there are 13 acres of beautiful garden. What a remarkable tree.
Yes, isn't it lovely?
Incredible.
This is a native field maple, Acer campestri.
I know it well, but the thing
Yes.
is, I've seen them in North America, acers,
Yes.
and they do this knobbly thing, but I've never seen it on a field maple here.
No.
So what was it like when you first came to this part of the garden?
Well, this is an old Roman clay pit, and it was very full of trees and brambles, nettles. You had to hack your way through, and then you'd see a glimpse of something beautiful like this tree or some ferns and things. And
Wow.
it just struck me that I had to make a garden here, and so that's when I started down here.
And did you tell John?
He was quite happy for me to do this down here because there's no value to the cows or the farm at all, so he said, oh, you can do what you like down there.
Yeah.
But I don't think he really thought I'd spend the next 60 years planting, weeding, gardening. This was the track that led from the field up there down to the cowshed, and they used to come in twice a day for milking.
Interesting, you kept that in because you'd never know, this is quite a formal area.
Yes, yes, I wanted it to be, what I really like doing is a fairly formal design, but with very informal planting.
What were the gardening influences? How did you learn?
Well, my father was a very keen gardener, and I'd always had a garden as a child. I remember my father bought some carnations, and I had a very poor one, and mine grew really well, and I thought, oh, that's marvellous. That's how it's done. Bit of TLC and that's it. This is the Millennium Garden.
Wow.
Obviously, I built this in 1999. Everybody at that time had got millennium fever and trying to think what to do. And on a visit to Chelsea, I put a deposit down on this lead trough here. And it's when you're on the way home on the train and you think, what on earth am I going to do with it? And then gradually I thought, I'll make a whole garden to put it in.
Well, I can see why it caught your eye.
Yes,
but building
lovely.
a garden around a trough is a bit like building a house around a vase.
It is. But that's the way a lot of my gardening has happened, you know.
So 22 years ago, this beautiful garden was farmland.
Absolutely, but I was longing to make a rill somewhere, and then to combine that with the Millennium Trough seemed a good idea.
Well, it looks like it's been here forever. When was it that you and your husband John stopped farming then?
Well, it must have been about 30 years ago. It was really when the milk quotas came in.
That was a happy day, I bet, because then John was free to help with the garden.
Well, that's a bit of a joke.
Enough said.
He didn't really enjoy gardening at all. But of course, the great thing, although it was too small a farm to be viable, that converts to a large garden.
Wow, this has a different atmosphere, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, it is. You feel really quite small walking through here, don't you?
You do.
The whole idea was that when I planted it, you couldn't see out of it. And I think it's worked pretty well, really.
Well, yeah, it's certainly got an intimate feel.
Yes.
Very exciting, sort of jungly.
Yes.
What's the story behind this garden?
We call this our anniversary garden, and this was to celebrate being here for 50 years.
Oh, the big 50.
Yes.
And the grasses themselves, what's the story with these?
There was a nursery nearby that was selling up, and it was in the autumn, and most of the good things had gone, and I made an offer for what was left. And it was a mass of grasses.
Yeah. Were the grasses labelled? I hope you don't mind me asking you that.
They were, yes.
Because you've got some tall ones next to the path, some shorter ones behind them. It's a wonderful sort of jamboree, really.
Yes. Well, I particularly wanted some of the tall ones to be next to the path so that you actually have to go round a corner to see what's round there, really.
Have you got any favourite varieties?
Well, I particularly like this Miscanthus Morning Light with the variegated leaf, because however tall it gets, it seems to stand up. The only thing about it is that it does flower very much later than the others.
I mean, this garden is really tall at the minute, but it's a dynamic one because in winter it gets chopped right down to the ground.
That's right.
I bet that means you're good with the secateurs.
It would be if I did them as secateurs, but what we do is bring in just a handheld hedge trimmer and then we set fire to them.
How interesting, because I use Miscanthus stems to light my barbecue.
Do you?
They burn,
yes,
don't
they burn really well.
Coming out to the garden every day pretty much for 60 years, I mean, you must get such deep satisfaction from your garden.
Yes.
I mean, do you feel at peace because of it? I mean,
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing like going out into a little bit of quiet garden and weeding or planting. And I hope it's a tranquil garden, and I hope that other people get the feeling of tranquility that I have over the years.
I know so well what Mary means by tranquility. You are part of the change and the flow and the creation of the garden, which gives this deep sense of reward and peace. Now, the fuchsias and the combination with these regal pelargoniums have come through summer surprisingly well. And I say surprising because, by and large, fuchsias don't like the sort of heat we've had. They've been shaded by the vine, which has worked well. We've kept the doors open all summer long, which has meant the blackbirds have got in and have eaten quite a lot of the grapes. But look, there are lots left. This is Black Hamburg. They're not quite ripe yet. These should be a rich, dark, almost black colour. And they will be ready for harvest in a few weeks' time if the wasps don't get to them first, which they haven't done yet. And everything else is fine. I'm particularly happy with these carnivorous plants. This is Sarracenia. These are here to do a job, to eat flies, which they've been doing quite happily. And they just seem to be particularly good this year. I haven't done anything special, but they've certainly enjoyed the conditions. And the one thing about them is they are permanently sitting in a tray of water. That is absolutely essential. Now, it's time to visit one of your gardens, and it belongs to Julie Fisher.
Hello, I'm Julie, and welcome to my little garden in Wirksworth, Derbyshire. My garden's really special because it's so small and it's got a lot in it, far too much probably. There was a flower bed at the bottom of the garden and a lilac tree, but that was about it. So we made a bigger flower bed and just tidied it up really. So one of the challenges of a small garden is obviously space. We've tried to use hanging baskets, and we've also got some troughs on the wall. There's not room for a pond, so we decided to have a water bowl. It's doing quite well now. It's got 3 water lilies, which I'm really thrilled about. But also the birds sit on the side just having a little drink, as does the cat. I like trying to grow things in pots that people tell me I shouldn't, and I've had some successes with that. It's like another room to the house to me. I'll come out here early in the morning with my cup of tea, and the bird song and the dawn chorus has been absolutely amazing and something I've never experienced before. To me, it's just my feeble attempts at making a little garden that's beautiful to me, but other people seem to really like it too, and it makes me feel really proud and happy.
Well, good for you, Julie, growing so much in containers. And if people tell you you can't do it, just ignore them. You'll be amazed at how often it works. These leaves that look in a dire state are the leaves of crocosmia lucifer. And in fact, this browning is caused by red spider mite. Red spider mite is something you normally associate with greenhouses. They like hot, dry conditions. And what they do is they suck the sap, which takes away the green, and it can damage the plant, but it won't kill it. And also, it won't necessarily spread. In fact, I want to lift the plant, divide it, replant some, and move it. it's a good idea to divide crocosmia about every 4 or 5 years. First thing I'll do is cut the foliage right back. Next thing to do is to dig around the plant and lift it, if possible, whole. Get the fork, and you could use a spade, of course, as deep as you can. You want to go down, if possible, about a foot, because the corms will go down and they're created every year on top of each other. Right. Here we go. That's it. Into the wheelbarrow. Crocosmias flower best if they're slightly compacted, so you don't want to break out all the corms and plant them individually. So I'm just going to divide it into two and just simply go down in and force it apart. There we go. Because we have a good clump of corms, this will flower well next year, and the division will give it new impetus and new life. Okay, that can go back in there. Plant them deeply, because if they're deep, they can access the moisture and they dry out a lot less. I'll water that in well, and that'll be absolutely fine. And the other half I'm going to put round the corner to give myself another splash of that lovely rich vermilion you get from Crocosmia lucifer. However, don't cut back the foliage if you're not moving them. Let it die back naturally, and that will feed into the corms for next year's flowers. But the colour should be best from dahlias at this time of year. But at Longmeadow this year, as a result of the drought, they are a non-event. However, last year, when we visited the garden of Philippa Stewart in Cheshire, her dahlias were magnificent. And I have to say that my own love for dahlias pales into insignificance compared to her passion for the plant.
Well, I first started growing dahlias because I needed to have some late summer colour. So I just started with, I think, half a dozen of the dinner plate varieties, and what's not to love about a plant that produces a flower that's 30 centimetres in diameter? And then once I started looking into it, I realised there were thousands and thousands of different varieties, all different shapes and sizes. Well, that was it, then I was hooked. The best blooms that you can get from dahlias are from rooted cuttings, but I don't have the facilities for using artificial heat here. So I increase my stock, as it were, by dividing my dahlias as much as possible. Each season I've stored the dahlias in wood shavings, so at the end of March I get the tubers out, I'll divide them, pot them up and bring them on in the greenhouse. And then at the end of May, I plant them out into the field when the chance of frost has gone. So at that point, I'll add a bit of fish blood and bone meal to the planting hole, and I'll also mulch the plants again as a way of keeping the moisture in, keeping the weeds down, and providing a little bit of extra feed for the dahlias. Once they start to flower, I will then feed with a foliar spray of liquid seaweed, and that helps to promote the blooms. So if you're just getting into dahlias, I can highly recommend growing some of the large dinner plate varieties like this one, Blackjack. Such an architectural plant. It's got fantastic colour to the stems as well and to the foliage. A plant like this you could grow in a pot as well. You don't need any fancy equipment to grow dahlias. And there are lots of other dinner plate varieties. The best known is Cafe au lait, beautiful subtle colouring. But there are some really dramatic ones as well, like Great Hercules, the kind of thing that can get you absolutely hooked on dahlias, basically. Over the years, I've found that my tastes in dahlias have changed though, and I've gone much more for the smaller, more detailed blooms. Something like Sweet Natalie here has got such a lovely subtle colour to it. Senior's Hope is fantastic because it goes with so many different flowers. Or even something like Jasudi Mercury here, which has like an inner glow to it. And look how wonderful those three look together. Oh, love it. So there's pretty much a dahlia for every possible situation. If you want to attract pollinators, then I'd recommend the single varieties like April Heather. And for vase life, I think I'd go for one of the medium ball varieties like Cornell Bronze. A couple of years ago I started drying the dahlias and was amazed by the results. For instance, this is Sweet Natalie when it's fresh, and here we have Sweet Natalie when it's dried. They take on a whole new character of shape and colour and texture when they're dried. Everybody thinks that they'd be very delicate, but in fact they're really very robust. This is Peppermint Splash, which I'm sorry, but I don't really like you in the fresh. But when it's dried, it takes on a whole new texture and colour and character, which I think is just gorgeous. So I've become a bit obsessed with the dried and basically converted as much as the house as I possibly can into a massive drying area. And for some reason, my family don't seem to mind that they've got flowers in their bedroom, bathroom, in the sitting room, and as my husband says, as long as he can see the telly, he really doesn't mind. I've got Cafe au Lait, Sweet Natalie, Small World, Goethe Twilight, all drying up here. I've got some more Cafe au Lait here, and the whites and the pale lilacs and pale lemons. The whole drying process is really very easy. You just need a space away from direct sunlight, not too hot, not too cold, and I suspend the flowers from the chicken wire, and they take about 3 weeks to dry. And as you can see, I've just gone a bit bonkers. So they do have a way of getting underneath your skin, dahlias, and once you get into the thousands and thousands of different varieties that are available, it's mind-blowing, but what a joy.
I have to say, not only can I not grow dahlias remotely as well as that, I had never thought of drying them before, but didn't they look good? Well, luckily, the cosmos have done well. And when you plant them into a border, they're really very little trouble. Slightly more demanding when you put them into a container. In a container, particularly if you pack them in like I have here, the thing that is very noticeable is they need watering a lot. And right till we get the first frost, I'll be watering these weekly. And they will keep flowering to the first frost. But the one thing you do have to do at this time of year is deadhead all the time. So as soon as they finish flowering, deadhead back to the next bud. And that will promote more flowers. Now, still to come on today's programme. We meet a gardener in Bristol who has transformed her city garden into a haven for wildlife.
If I've actually managed to make a little tiny difference that has enabled something else to live in the way that it actually should live, that's such a privilege.
Adam visits Lowther Castle to discover how the team there have created a new garden within the bones of the building.
I actually just want to jump up and down now because this is like mind-blowingly incredible.
But first we're visiting one of your gardens, and it belongs to Christina de Armand, who gardens high up in the sky above Los Angeles.
Hello, Gardener's World. Welcome to sunny Southern California.
My dream is to someday have a large wildlife-friendly garden, but I'm currently living in a high-rise apartment in downtown LA. In the city, my expectations for wildlife were low, So for this balcony, I initially aimed for a tranquil space to bring a bit of green into my life. I soon started noticing some visitors, like this brave bee who flew up to the 38th floor, and this impressive red-tailed hawk. So I started adding some features for my new friends, like this hummingbird feeder. Reducing waste is important to me, so my dad and I built a planter whose main function is to conceal a worm bin. One interesting side effect of the worm bin is how it has affected this pair of bougainvillea. The one on the left is more leafy and without any flowers. I think it's most likely due to its proximity to the rich soil made by the worms. I had to take advantage of the climate, so I'm growing lemons and I can't wait for the first harvest. This philodendron adds an exotic feel to the space, while the succulents and cacti have been great for their low maintenance and low water needs. That's all for now. On behalf of Snacks and I, thank you for spending some time with us in our little garden.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Christina. That's probably the loftiest garden that we've had on the programme. And how wonderful to have hummingbirds and red-tailed hawks just appearing on your balcony. Fantastic. I planted these yews last year. These are all grown from cuttings that I took a few years ago. They take very easily, and you can find that you can have miles of hedging for no cost at all if you're just a little bit patient. What we do have is some of the growth growing out this way, which we don't want yet, and some of it growing dead vertically. And with a hedge, you don't trim it back till it reaches the height that you want it to be. So this is about the right height, and I can just trim this off. And if I just take that off there, that's the height I want. And even just doing that will encourage side shoots to growth. Now, I could take a cutting from that, but it's not ideal cutting material. By and large, I tend to like to take longer growth. So if I cut back, the shoots that are growing outwards in this direction, like that, that is potentially very nice cut material. There's no magic shape you're looking for, but what you do need is enough of a stem and also a bit of last year's growth attached, because that will make them much more durable. They'll be slightly slower to strike roots, but they're much easier to look after. Evergreen cuttings are actually more durable than many, and you have more time and there's less need to panic. But it doesn't hurt just to protect them in a bag and then put them into some soil as quickly as possible. Now, whilst I'm taking yew cuttings, it's also the perfect time of year to take any woody evergreen cuttings like box or philauria or holly. And it's a brilliant way of making hedging plants or topiary that you can grow in your garden. Now, while I'm doing this, we're going to visit a garden in Bristol, which focuses on creating the best possible conditions for as wide a range of wildlife as possible.
My garden brings me so much pleasure. It's just somewhere that I can just feel completely safe and comfortable. And every time I wander around it, I discover something new. And if I've actually managed to make a little tiny difference that has enabled something else to live in the way that it actually should live, that's such a privilege. I just try and do the best I possibly can to get as many different creatures to enjoy it. My name's Christine Griffiths, and this is my little piece of paradise. We moved here 24 years ago, just a typical suburban new build estate. When we moved here, there was nothing, apart from the lovely mature trees behind me here. All there was mud. This garden has been created entirely on a budget. I've actually bought very, very few of the plants that are here. The vast majority of them come from seed that I've collected, and I always bring a little bit of a memory plant from wherever we've lived before. And this garden is also full of memory plants from all my relations, my grandparents, my dad, my mum, my mother-in-law, and lots of friends. One of the plants that does really well in this garden is this. It's a type of yarrow. It has these lovely pink flowers now, and then they fade to purple in the autumn, but it's fantastic for pollinators. Bees and hoverflies in particular love it. I've grown this just from a tiny little plug plant, and as you can see, it spreads really easily. And then another one that I really love is this creeping jenny here, with these lovely bright yellow flowers. Again, it's really nice for pollinators. It's a great ground cover plant. I think people have got this miscomprehension that a wildlife garden has to just be a mess and everything just has to be left to grow. And that's not the idea of it. You can still encourage nature and do a wonderful job and help everything that's going on by being tidy. I am very tidy. I've got my grass cut very short in places. I've got my neat edging and things like that. But then I've also got these areas that I've let do their own thing. This lovely bush here is actually privet, which I think is a very underrated plant. What I've noticed about this one is since I've cut it into this shape, I'm getting more and more flower on it, so more and more pollinators using it. It now has black berries that are in the autumn, and wonderfully, we actually have blackcaps in the garden. In fact, last year we had a pair, a male and female blackcap, so a really good example of a very underrated plant, which is fantastic for wildlife. This is my meadow area, and I think it's probably the one thing that I've done that's made the biggest difference to the garden. It's got a huge variety of different plants in it, most of which I've actually just put in here from seed. My meadow has made the most incredible difference to my garden, it really has. Even if you've only got a square metre that you can use, that little square metre would make such a difference. This garden attracts a huge range of different wildlife, from tiny insects through to a large range of birds to some really quite surprising mammals. We've got a trail cam that we put out at night now, and that means that we can actually see what's been going on in the garden when we're tucked up in bed. There's a really cute little fox cub that comes through here, has a bit of a look around, really inquisitive. And they're coming through the hole that I've made through the hedge. But the most surprising thing that happened here was I made a little tunnel for hedgehogs to come through, and that wasn't what I attracted. After I'd made this little tunnel, I woke up in the morning, looked out the window, and all the rocks were blasted all over the lawn. And so we put the camera out and had a look, and much to our amazement, it was a badger. And it wasn't just one badger, it was multiple badgers. And that was the most amazing thing, to actually see badgers in my garden. It's such a privilege to have them, it's wonderful. One of the things that I've found since we have been lucky enough to have the badgers coming into the garden is that I definitely have less snails and slugs. Lupins are one of my favourite plants, which I'd actually given up growing, but I'm finding that I can now grow things like that again because I've got the badgers and things coming in which appear to be eating the snails and slugs. If you put a pond into your garden, a water source, it's the biggest thing that you can actually do to encourage wildlife in your garden because everything needs water, from the smallest insect to the largest mammal. And if you build it, they will come, is the phrase, and it absolutely is true. Mostly newts and frogs in here, but also the foxes drink from it, the badgers drink from it. We've seen mice drinking from it in the past. What I'm doing here is I'm removing some of these water lily leaves because this isn't a particularly good environment for this water lily. It's a bit too shady. But to make sure that there's still enough shelter for the creatures that live in here, I'm actually going to do something which will sound absolutely ridiculous. I've got here a bag of supermarket watercress, British-grown watercress, and all you need to do is have a look to see if you can find some pieces that have got longish stems, and there are some very tiny little roots on there, and you literally drop it in the pond. And it's going to do a wonderful job of creating some cover, but also doing a great job of keeping the water clear. And this here is some watercress that I put in 2 years ago. It's just finished flowering. You can see lots of seed heads on here now, so you can see how many flowers it's had. But the one thing you do have to bear in mind is that you must never actually eat the watercress from the pond because you don't actually know what's in the pond yourself. It's safe to eat the rest that's left in the bag, but definitely not that. You don't need a big space to make yourself feel happy. If you just connect with what's around you and connect with nature, I think it's hugely important, and it just makes me feel really happy.
Trong phim có nhiều có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Nhỉ, 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 có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Đi khám da liễu về, bác sĩ bảo có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Nhỉ, 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 nhỉ. Có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Đi khám da liễu về, bác sĩ bảo có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Đi khám da liễu về, bác sĩ bảo có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Đi khám da liễu về, bác sĩ bảo có ai trong tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Tim không nhỉ? Nhỉ, 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 nhỉ.
I think the message that is so important is that you don't need a big garden or a big space to make a big difference to wildlife and to get a huge amount of pleasure. Now you can see I've done one pot with cuttings, and you can see I've placed them around the outside and buried them full length in a very gritty compost mix. The important thing is it's well drained. Perlite, vermiculite, grit, or even sand. The one thing that you can't take at all is being waterlogged. So make sure the drainage is good. And then strip off the lower leaves, as I have done here. Cut below a node, because that's the point that is most likely to develop roots, although roots will develop along the stem as well. And then bury it right down full depth, like that. And when you put them out for the winter, and they don't need a greenhouse or anything like that, just make sure that they're not in a place where they're going to get saturated. And this next to me is a cutting that I took about 4 years ago. It just shows you what's possible. That has grown exceptionally well. And if you just get into the rhythm of plants like yew or box and stick with it and be patient for a year or two, before long you find you've got scores of really good plants for free. Now it's time to visit one of your gardens, and this takes us to a much loved allotment in Leicester.
Hi, my name's Lisa Cipriano. I've been at my allotment all day today and I'm extremely dirty. I live and breathe my allotment, and I wondered if you'd like to share it with me today. I think an allotment should be beautiful as well as productive. This, for instance, is a store that I made to store my nets. I use the top as a living roof, and I've got parsley and lettuce on the top. I like to have lots of flowers. The more flowers, the more beneficial insects. I like quirky things. This is a fireplace I made out of a pallet with dahlias in. I absolutely love my pond. And in it, I have newts, I have snails, I do have frogs as well. I've also made this. It's a book hotel with all the rubble hidden in between the pallets. I've called it Buckingham Palace, and on the top, I've planted a living roof with alpines. This plot is just over a standard plot size. And yeah, it is a lot of hard work because I make it hard work, but I love it. What more could you want?
I like the way that Lisa is using her allotment for delight, as well as just sort of pragmatic nourishment. I think the more they can be used like that, the better. I'm preparing some garlic to plant. I do like to start getting garlic in the ground in September and do a further sowing or planting in October and even November. It's a good idea to get them in the ground by Christmas because they need a period of cold in order for the cloves to form. If you put them in too late, what you can find is they grow, but you just have one solid bulb rather than being divided up into cloves. But this first planting is invariably for hardneck varieties. And there are two types of garlic, there's hardneck and softneck. And what you buy in the supermarket is softneck. And of course that refers to the stem, which is soft and you can twist and bend. But connoisseurs reckon that hardneck garlic tastes even better. And hardneck have this very firm, stiff stem sticking out of which the flower grows on top. Now this is a variety called cork. It's fairly recent, and cork is a variety that's been tried and tested for British winters. The cloves are actually all really nice and big, and the reason I'm breaking it up is because you plant the cloves, not the bulbs, and you only want to plant big cloves, because the bigger the clove, the bigger the bulb. Now you may remember that last week in this raised bed I sowed some spinach, and in that week the spinach has already germinated and we've got rows of it. And I'm going to use the space between the rows to grow garlic. Now there are two things you need to bear in mind when planting garlic. The first is pointy end up, and these need to be planted with at least the height of the bulb above it with soil. And plant them about 9 inches to a foot apart. And the idea is that these will appear in about a month's time or so, and they won't grow a lot over winter, but the spinach will. So I'm going to harvest the spinach all over winter while the garlic is gently establishing. And the garlic will really start to grow away about next April, by which time I will have taken the spinach out and then the garlic can have the bed to itself. A raised bed is a really good way to grow garlic because they do like rich soil, but also good drainage. If you've got very wet ground, you can grow garlic in containers, but they do need to have at least 6 inches between the cloves and also give them room for the roots to grow, and then you get a really nice big bulb which will give you lovely plump cloves. The other option is plant each clove in a small pot, grow it on, doesn't need to be indoors, it can be left outside, and then next spring plant it out where it's to grow, but ideally get them in the ground if you can. Now Adam has been to see gardens of all kinds, and most of them he's shared with us, but this week he goes to visit what is perhaps one of the most romantic gardens you could possibly conceive.
I've come to one of the country's wildest and most exciting gardens. It's a place I've been wanting to visit for a very long time. This is Lowther Castle. Lost to the wilderness for nearly a century, the remarkable gardens here at Lowther have started to re-emerge thanks to one of Europe's biggest restoration projects. Little by little, an epic horticultural rescue has been underway. And since 2012, it's been head gardener Martin Ogle who has been the driving force. I'm meeting him in one of the complete gardens within the castle ruin. So Martin, you're a local lad.
Yes.
You know, as a kid, when did this place first come on your radar?
As a child, I remember Lowther Castle stood on the distant hillside, and to a lot of locals, the mysterious shell of Lowther Castle has stood here for many, many years. It's stuck in everyone's memory, I think.
But I walked in here, you know, the birds flew up, and there's a sense of theatre. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up. There's an incredible feeling about the place, isn't there?
There is, yeah. Overall, I mean, what we aim to do with the planting is just to create this unique atmosphere and sense of place.
It's not big on colour, you know, it plays with texture, foliage, and there's a calmness to the place. But you sort of look around it, you know, in its day, this must have been some place. How did it end up like this?
It's quite a long story, to be honest. It really is. The last occupant of this building was a chap called the Yellow Earl.
I've read a little bit about him. He sounds, to be fair, he sounds like he'd be a great fella to have a night out with.
Yes, yeah, I imagine so, yeah. You know, very much entertained the rich and famous here at Lowther Castle, led a very, very extravagant lifestyle, and he was also a keen gardener as well. At that time period, early 1900s, the gardens here at Lowther were at the height of horticultural fashions. Towards the end of the 1930s, the Lowther estate could no longer afford to bankroll the yellow whale's lifestyle, and so the yellow whale was removed from the castle, and the garden was last opened to the public in 1939.
As Lowther fell into decline, Bruce crops, pig farms were installed, until finally a trust was formed and employed designer Dan Pearson to retrieve and reimagine the gardens. The romance of the castle ruined garden is matched with the parterre, which has been sublimely planted to give the appearance of a threadbare tapestry. Elsewhere, other remnants of the past have been given new life, like the magnificent rose garden, laid out like the folds of a flower. But there's still much to do, including areas only recently cleared of spruce, like the rock garden.
I actually just want to jump up and down now, because this is like, for me, mind-blowingly incredible. What was it like for you when the trees got cleared?
It was the big reveal, really. We removed all of the trees, leaving just the broad leaves, and that's when we got a full idea of what we were working with in here.
So I know, we talked about Earl being extravagant and whatever, but you don't go to this level of detail and work without caring about something. He must have loved gardening.
Absolutely, yeah. This was his showpiece. This was one of the gems of the garden. We know there's a collection of trilliums that come back every year that have survived the 90 years worth of neglect and buried by nature, and they still thrive in the corner of the rock garden.
Yeah.
And we know that the yellow whale brought those back here to Lowther Castle from a trip to Canada many years ago.
And how are we going to sort of, say we, like I'm staying now, obviously, as you can see, but what are we looking to put back sort of botanically?
We're using a whole host of bulbs, perennials, grasses, ferns, to just play into that effect of that atmosphere and sense of place within this garden.
To complete my tour, Martin wants to take me to the orchard, an area he has lovingly curated, featuring apples derived from the surrounding area and from the estate itself. There's even a variety called Yellow Earl.
Apart from the fact that we obviously hope this tree behaves an awful lot better than the Earl himself,
yeah.
what is it bringing to the party that's going to make it special?
That heritage, and that connection with Lowther and the garden, it's kind of icing on the cake, as it were.
Yeah. You know what I'm going to ask, don't you?
Yeah.
Can I? Is that
all right? Of course you can, yes.
Are you sure?
By all means, yeah.
I don't want you talking about me when I'm gone. So he walked in here, and what he did is he started pinching our apples. It's probably slightly sweeter than the yellow Earl probably was as a character, wasn't it?
Probably, yes. Yeah.
I'm now in the new rose garden, and I think what's special about this place is it's not stuck in the past. It's evolving and it's moving forward, but they're doing it in such a gentle, calm way. The whole place is intoxicating. It's not just the smell of these roses, it takes you on this enchanted journey. And you know what? I think I am in love.
I think that looks magical, and certainly I'd love to go and see it. It is open to the public every day of the year, so if you go to their website you can get details of the actual opening hours, and I will get there as soon as I possibly can. Now, the container veg has had a mixed summer. Of course it has, because the truth is it was almost the worst possible year you could try growing vegetables in containers. The sort of heat and drought we had meant that they needed watering at least once a day, if not twice a day, and if I'm honest, that didn't always happen. But nevertheless, I've been very happy with the results. And the empty containers are where we've eaten the crops. We had really good potatoes. We had good cabbages, we've had lovely lettuces, we've had beans. I've left some on to dry so we can keep the seed. We did do a trial with the tomatoes. They're all gardener's delight, and we grew them in 3 different ways. One in a conventional growing bag, one in which I cut the bottoms of 3 pots and put them on top of the holes in the grow bag so that you've got extra root run, and one where we cut a grow bag in half, turned it on its end and planted 1 plant in each of them. And the idea was to see which would do better. And I have to say that they've all done equally well. There really doesn't seem to be any difference. And to me, that means just give it a go. It doesn't really matter how you grow them. You can grow good tomatoes in a container. I am adding a few plants in now, a few lettuce. It's too late to sow seed, but if you can buy young plants, there's still time to do that. Now, I'm just loosening up the compost in here, but don't be tempted to reuse it as it is, because all the goodness will be out of it. So I've added plenty of garden compost, just to give it a bit more goodness, because we haven't got very long for this to grow, and we want maximum results. So I'm going to fill that up, like that, and just smooth it out, and plant into that. This is a salad bowl variety, which there's no reason why I shouldn't be harvesting this almost till Christmas. And you can see I've grown these from seed. I sowed the seed about 6 weeks ago. Nice little plugs. Right, while I'm doing this, here are your jobs for the weekend. Pears don't ripen on the tree, so they need picking now. Carefully lift them so the stem breaks off, and then handle them gently when you put them in a basket. They will store for a while in a cool, dark place, but once they're ripe, they need to be eaten immediately. And to stagger this, put a few at a time on a sunny windowsill. It's been a hard year for grass of all kinds, but you can do a lot of good simply by giving them a good scratch. Use a wire rake and rake them vigorously, pulling up all dead grass and moss and exposing some bare soil. It might look a little rough at first, but we'll quickly recover and set them up for winter and next spring. If you've got climbers that are dangling or hanging free, like roses, wisteria, clematis or honeysuckle, tie them in. And this is to protect them from storm damage, which is quite likely at this time of year. And if they're securely tied, you can come back to them later to prune. Today is the autumn equinox. That means 2 things. 1, as of tomorrow, the nights get longer than the days, which is not so good. But 2, we are officially in autumn, the season of fruitfulness, and the apple trees are groaning. The pears have been really good this year. And here in the Paradise Garden, the fruits have been great too. The lemons have been fantastic. We've been picking them all summer. And there are lots and lots more ripening. And a lemon tree can have flowers, immature fruit and mature fruit all at the same time. And it's important to harvest the mature fruit. If you don't harvest them, that inhibits the development of flowers and the ripening of the fruit. So I've been eyeing this particularly large lemon for a number of weeks now, and I think it should be ready. So let's see. Give it a gentle twist. There we go. Oh, the incredible freshness and zest of that lemon. That is the perfect autumnal harvest. But that is also all we've got time for today. Next week, you're with Adam at 8 o'clock, and I'll see you back here at Longmeadow in a fortnight's time with a new member of the family. See you then. Bye-bye.
And Adam shows us how to make a beautiful garden anywhere in this book. How I Garden is available now. And James explores country houses and cooks a feast. Watch Strawbridge Over the Drawbridge on BBC iPlayer. Well, next, the most perfect view, and Bob's on Monster Watch to Loch Ness with Mortimer and Whitehouse.
Best piece of advice I've been given in all these years came from Eric. He said to me, faster and louder.
There's no real moment in my life that I've questioned a relationship to music.
The best of Britain's cultural minds, in their own words. Sunday nights on BBC4.